Welcome to the Pick Me Up Podcast Unscripted, brought to you by CDI College, the training you need for the career you want. I'm Jennifer Lee, and join me for a monthly conversation where we unravel the myths of mental health with our expert guests. Get ready for a fun and informative deep dive into many topics that are currently on our minds. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of CDI College's Pick Me Up podcast. I'm Jennifer Lee. I'm really excited to talk about this next topic because it's been a year and a half, and I can't believe that we're coming up to 2 years in March for the pandemic. It has been a wild ride for a lot of us, and I remember thinking that the pandemic was only going to last like a year. I was being realistic. I was like, it's going to last a year. Other people like 3 months, 6 months. I was like, a year. And then the year mark came and lockdown was happening again. I was like, okay, maybe next year will be different. So you never know. But all joking aside, it's been a very serious time. And of course, my heart goes out to the healthcare professionals that have been working hard because we don't see what happens behind the scenes. And they really, truly have been the heroes of the story. So we wanted to make sure that we were talking to healthcare professionals in this next episode. So I have Carly, who is an LPN. She's actually alumni of CDI College. So we're going to get to talk to her and ask her what it's been like during the pandemic, because we always hear about it on the news, but I wanted to discuss with her. And I think it's important for people that are going into this career right now, that are students or people that have maybe just started their career right out of nursing schools, to really think about what's going on, because this would be hard on anybody. And it is, a lot of nurses were hearing there's burnout. I was watching a lot of news stories today from the US and Canada, and burnout was a big concern. Lack of healthcare professionals, and especially rural areas, was a concern. So this is a major topic, and I just wanted to discuss with someone what's really going on, what's it like to work in the healthcare right now, and kind of keep it positive too, because this is a career that a lot of people love, and it is a very important career. And that's why I want to stress that if you're feeling like, oh no, what am I doing right now? That's okay. That's a normal reaction. That's why we wanted to bring Carly on. So how are you, Carly? How's it going?
I'm doing great. I'm on a day off, so I'm doing excellent.
Perfect. Well, just because I like to get to know a little bit more about everybody else, can you tell us the shortened version of your life story and how you became an LPN?
Sure. So I actually became an LPN almost a decade ago, so we're rounding about 9 years. I always had a background completely on the opposite side of the spectrum in creative studies, and I did my schooling in communications and a little bit in lit first, and I moved to Vancouver from the prairies, and I wanted to go back to school and figure out where to go, and I actually went into the wrong interview, and the student counselor was really talking up the nursing program, and I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, oh, that wasn't what I was here for. But I mean, it's definitely something to consider. And when one of my friends signed up for CDI College, she said, why don't you just join me and we'll do the next intake. And I just thought, you know what, it's a great career path. I'm going to go for it. And I've been in it for 10 years now, and just enjoying everything from peds to palliative and everything in between. So started by accident and kind of came full circle to spending a whole decade in it.
And just before we move forward, I want to ask you this question, because I know through my research, it came up a lot, was what's the difference between an LPN and an RN? And I know they're both nurses, but a lot of people don't know that. So can you explain a little bit about the difference?
Sure. An LPN is a licensed practical nurse. It's generally a diploma program. And an RN is a registered nurse, and that's usually through a bachelor's of science in nursing. There's different designations in different countries, but the short and simple is an LPN is the diploma nurse and an RN is the degreed nurse.
And what are some of the differences, like in your job? Like what can you not do and an RN can do, just so we have a little bit of clarification?
Sure, yeah. The RN has more of an expanded scope. So a registered nurse would be more able to take on, say, critical care, such as ICU or neonatal ICU. And generally, RNs sort of do a lot more of the expanded or technical work, such as in cancer agencies. We're seeing the scope change a lot now. So there are just some limitations in maybe the more critical aspects of nursing that are designated to RNs. Otherwise, I think we do a lot of the same work.
There we go. And what do you love personally about being an LPN?
I think I've always found healthcare really interesting. I really enjoy sort of being in the field and that there are so many different areas you can go into, and just it's always kind of same different. So no matter where you want to take your career, there's always little niches. I'm always discovering new things about healthcare and new areas where I can work, and so it's just sort of a bit of an endless journey.
When it comes to education, no matter what you take, I believe that it is challenging because there's courses that you've never done before, no matter what area of study you're going into. I feel like everyone's going to hit that mental block in a way, I guess, of being like, oh, well, I didn't really know I needed to do this, or this subject maybe is not my strong suit. So did you ever have those challenges when you were becoming an LPN, and how did you kind of deal with that, like to get through and then eventually earn your diploma?
One of the things that I like about education is it's kind of this positive pressure. It can be definitely frustrating. It can be difficult. You certainly lose a few hours of sleep and social time, but it's something where you're putting that back into yourself. You're really bettering yourself, and it is a bit of pressure, but it's this pressure to sort of do better. For me, I always just try to sleep as much as I could. Sometimes a few hours is better than an all-nighter, and just try to keep moving forward. So I personally kind of like school though, and I like that pressure, but I think that you just have to really grind out the hard courses and really take a moment to enjoy the ones that you excel in.
And kind of moving over now to the pandemic, of course, school teaches you the basics, and you've been in the field for a long time, but probably never really prepared you for a pandemic, which is okay. I don't think any of us saw this coming. So unfortunately, now there's been a lot of talk about burnout. Um, do you ever feel burnt out during this time? And can you kind of speak to like how you get through it? Any like positive tips?
Absolutely. Yeah, when I went to school, there wasn't really a global pandemic shutdown portion to the curriculum yet. I'm sure that's been thoroughly added. I mean, of course, we studied things like, the Spanish flu and SARS and H1N1, things like that. And you're prepared to some level, especially when you actually get on the floor and you work in hospital wards, especially medicine units, where infectious disease and the public health portion plays in. But we, as healthcare professionals, were really rocked by this. Just nobody was prepared. And so every week things were changing, every month things were changing. Of course, we first thought it was only 2 weeks, and then maybe 2 months. And then now we're hitting 2 years, and we're certainly looking at not near the end, but hitting a more manageable point. So for me, when the pandemic first started, I was actually working in private care. A lot of nurses lost their jobs in March of 2020. I was teaching, and I was also, working in different, more private areas. And then I lost my job, and I was very quickly pulled back into the hospital to help. And it was a really strange time because that was one of the hospitals that I trained at. I did a lot of clinicals at VGH, and I had worked there. So I was prepared to go back. It's always kind of been my home, but to see it very empty and very quiet, and to always have that sort of intense background, knowing that we didn't know what would happen in the near future or the long term. And just even things like trying to have appropriate PPE when we were running out. There was just crisis after crisis. And I think a lot of us really just really kind of struggled in those really quiet, tense times for the first little bit. Since then, it's been a learning process. To the best
Yeah, and how do someone like yourself kind of care for their own mental health when you're seeing all this stuff daily and people dying? It's got to take a toll eventually on you.
I won't lie. The first couple of years of nursing was really difficult. It really requires a mental shift. It's a lot of desensitizing that has to happen. And not that you lose any empathy or care for your patients, but just a desensitization to all of the craziness that goes on around you, that the amount of change or the amount of things that are just, just a lot for what's happening. So I personally I think for the first few months, because everything was so quiet, I was just going for walks after work and hoping for the best. But now I think, I'm just finding more ways to sort of decompress and just keep sane. And sometimes that's just talking to your other coworkers and having each other support.
And what would you say to students right now? Because I know right now it's probably an unsure time, or people that had just graduated and they're getting their first job at a hospital or in private care that are maybe thinking like, oh, did I make the right decision? Any like advice for those people and now that you've been in healthcare and you've had, some years with the pandemic, some years without the pandemic?
I don't think healthcare is ever a bad idea to get into. I always think that healthcare is a great decision. Nursing itself just has endless possibilities. I myself, found sometimes being in a hospital overwhelming, and maybe I would step out into private, or maybe I would get trained in another area. You can always move around. But some people do spend a clinical or two in hands-on care and realize this is not what I signed up for. Some people get a year or two in and realize it's not what they signed up for. But there's just such a good base with that knowledge that you can find other career options, either within healthcare or otherwise. So it's never a bad decision, but it's not for everyone, and that's okay if you need to step out.
And do you think if you're interested in what an aspect of healthcare, like you said, there's so many, good to talk to people like yourself or other people in it to kind of like get an idea more?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you should always just, if you're interested in any sort of area, ask people that work in that area, realistically, what is it like? I kind of, of course you start any career. I started nursing thinking that I was going to be the next Florence Nightingale, and it's not as sweet and romanticized as that. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of dirty work, but it's also just such a unique experience that it's shaped who I am. You can't change this experience with anything else. Healthcare is so unique in the way you connect with people and the way that you grow. So it's just incredible.
Well, it's like I was thinking about it when prepping for this interview. It's not like Grey's Anatomy or like any of the doctor shows ER out there. There is one called Nurses now, specifically to nurses. I've only caught a second of it, but I think it was just, having steamy romance in the janitor closet, which, could happen, but probably not super practical.
Lied to us about that. It's not as steamy as people think. There's a lot of love in healthcare, but it is not Grey's Anatomy. And so unfortunately we cannot go in with these expectations.
You're looking for romance, maybe not the right career.
No, but there's a lot of people in it. So, you can't discredit that.
Can you take us through what like a typical day looks like for nursing, or like kind of reveal the career, a little bit of like what you do as an LPN, and especially now during COVID?
Sure. There's just so many different levels. There are some jobs where I've had, of course, the usual ward work is you get in and it's usually a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift, or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So you're getting in at about half an hour before your shift. You're going over everything with the previous nurse to get your handover. And then from there, you're just organizing your day. Most of it is just seeing who needs what first. You're getting your patients up, you're getting medications ready. You're getting people cleaned up and sorted for their meals. You're organizing just any of their therapies and any of their care. You're watching their condition. it's a lot of monitoring, and essentially it's helping these patients organize their day in a way that they can progress in their care. And so a lot of it is being on top of things, and sometimes it's just taking those little extra moments too to make sure that people are comforted or that their families have all the information they need. Some jobs I've worked 9 to 5, and I've been maybe in a surgical ward where I'm admitting and discharging patients, where I'm getting them organized for their procedures. And then now I'm in a pandemic response that role, which is with public health, and every day is completely different. Some days I'm in the office doing case investigations or contact tracing and calling people and educating people. Sometimes I'm sent away to a different clinic just to help with vaccinations or swabs. Sometimes I'm just sent to a different city or town in BC to just support their team. And so you definitely have to be open to change. You can stay in one spot always, but right now I feel like I've experienced nursing on every end of the spectrum. So I'm partial to the 9 to 5 these days, though.
Probably trying many different aspects of your career too probably helps maintain your mental health as well, because you're not just stuck somewhere for years on end doing the same thing.
Repetition is insanity sometimes. Some people really love the familiar. Some people thrive a lot on change. And so you can really choose either that suits you.
And I only say that because I have a lot of nursing friends, and right now they still love what they do and they want to continue in the nursing field. But because they've been working on the COVID wards for the last year and a bit, they feel burnt out, which is fair, and they've been doing an amazing job. But some of them have been taking telehealth positions just for now, and they said it's not because they don't love nursing; it's because they want to continue to love what they do, and they just need a little bit of a break. And I think that's an important point to make, is like, it's okay if you need to take a break wherever you are in the healthcare system. If you are feeling burnt out, I think it's okay to be like, I want to try this for a little bit. Doesn't mean you can't come back.
And I feel like with healthcare, with jobs in general, with the way the economy is, more than ever, we have options. With nursing, if you're getting burnt out from wards and night shifts, you can take a step back, take a 9 to 5, take an office job for a bit. And when you realize, you know what, I want a little bit more for myself, you can step back into that, or you can opt for education and do another area. So yeah, I think the best thing too for your mental health, especially if you're feeling burnt out in an area, is to find something else. Take that time so that you don't just hate your whole profession, and then step back when you need to. And to have that option is really helpful.
And speaking of mental health, a recent study in the healthcare revealed that like 93% of people said that it's important to take care of your mental health like it is your physical health, but only 43% said that they would actually be honest at work about their mental health because they didn't want to be seen as like, not well, or seen as like different. But I think it's very important, and I've gone on my own mental health journey, and I've kind of said this to a few of the people I've interviewed, and it's tough. It takes a long time to be honest about it. But why do you think a lot of people are still maybe not honest in the healthcare, especially during COVID right now, which I feel a lot more people are accepting of it than maybe they were a few years ago?
Mental health and healthcare, I feel like, because a lot of healthcare professions require a lot of long hours, require almost guaranteed burnout at some point. A lot of people just don't want to admit that they can't necessarily handle it. It's certainly a bit of a competitive field. But I think we're all experiencing burnout. I think that any healthcare professional that says that they're not stressed out at least a little bit is certainly lying. And that's okay. We experience that a lot. We're dealing with life and death, or scary situations, or a lot of human emotions. And especially if you're an empathetic person, which is why I think a lot of us go into the profession in the first place. I mean, there's no way that you can't be feeling it. But I think there is certainly a lot of stigma that you don't want to be seen as incapable of managing your mental health. You don't want to be seen as, crumbling in those moments, especially when you need to have it together. But I think what people forget is the way that we are at work. A lot of times it's just almost automatic. You go on autopilot when these big situations happen because you're trained, because you're professionals. And that doesn't mean that just because you're struggling with your mental health that you will struggle with your career too in that way. We're still trained. So I think it's getting better, but I think certainly people are a little bit worried about that stigma of just being incapable in their field.
I'm glad you said that, because I think also as society, we kind of hold all of you guys up in a very high regard in healthcare, which is great because you guys do an amazing job. But at the end of the day, you're all human beings. So we see you as like, you have to be strong, because when something big happens, natural disaster or pandemic, it's not me that's in this profession. You have to be strong. You can't crack. And I think that's a very unfair representation, unfair expectations of us that are not in the healthcare industry.
Yeah. But that's exactly it. We're all people. So, I mean, this is scary for everybody. This, especially when the pandemic started, everybody was really scared and everybody was really overwhelmed, I mean, just even as a healthcare professional, so many people were asking questions and this is all they wanted to talk about. And then at work, it was all we talked about. And it felt incredibly overwhelming. But, and I think that's why a lot of healthcare professionals maybe talk to each other a lot more about it, just because we feel like we can have that support. We can sort of admit to each other that we're really struggling. But, I think it's fair to say that in these situations, nobody knows what's going to happen. And that's just, that's really stressful for everyone.
It is. And I think we just I know we've all kind of been saying, be kind to each other. And I know that unfortunately on the news, they've shown that some healthcare professionals have had a bit of confrontation with some people that maybe are not enjoying or not wanting to follow the rules the government has put in place, but really shouldn't be taking it out on anybody. It's their choice, whatever they choose to do. But what is something you want people to know that are maybe not taking the pandemic seriously? And this is something I watched on the documentaries today. They're like, I don't understand why people don't realize it's real.
I would encourage people to get their education and resources from actual health professionals, from government websites, from places that use scientific evidence. I would say that because it is science, you can't argue with science. And I really encourage people to seek a lot more education. And for the public that is maybe unsure or hesitant, I would encourage you to not I would encourage you to just not believe everything that you read. Sometimes the loudest voices are not always the most correct voices. There are a lot of very quiet people who are working very hard behind the scenes in healthcare that don't necessarily want to get involved in these arguments and these conversations. And those are the people that you should be talking to about getting your information. So don't feel that just because you might see a lot of comments stating otherwise, that these people are correct. It's a very small population of say non-believers, and they just happen to be quite a bit louder than the rest of us. And so please take everything with a grain of salt and really, try to listen to the people that have dedicated their whole lives to this field.
It's interesting because they always said, this is before COVID, everyone would be like, if you have a problem or a medical issue and maybe you're not feeling correct or you've got a bump on your leg, don't Google it. Don't go on to Google, because you're not a doctor. Like, I am not a medical professional. So I've been guilty of that. And I'm like, oh no, I have this. And I don't. But it's the same thing. Don't go onto social media for your medical advice. Talk to a professional like yourself who has studied. I haven't studied anything to do with the medical industry. My background's broadcasting. I would be the worst person to ask for advice on anything to do with medical.
Sure. But it's a lot. It's always changing too, even for us. I mean, it's new information all the time. And so I think it's also good to be open to recognizing that it's okay to change your opinion. It doesn't make you a hypocrite. Sometimes there's just new information, there's new data, there's new science. It is okay to change your opinion and say, maybe I was wrong before. Maybe there's a lot more to it. And maybe these trained professionals are onto something. And just because things are changing doesn't negate that information before. We're all still learning. And even though, a lot of healthcare professionals have a really strong base, every day is a new adventure in the medical world. And so just keep being open to things changing and progressing.
Great advice. And I love asking this question because every job is different and we don't know until we actually do it. So what is one misconception about being a licensed practical nurse?
A misconception about it. I think it's the same misconception for all nursing, that maybe you're dancing around handing handsome patients pills all day, or that there's just such gratitude or such glory in it. And it can be a dirty job. It can be a hard job. There's definitely some days that you're going to go home crying. And I think a lot of nurses will say, I might have had 9 bad experiences today, but that one good experience really made up for everything. And I think that's true. So, keep looking for that one good thing.
And you obviously love what you do. And I think that's the thing is, like, once you love what you do, no matter what it is, you're going to have bad days and everything. Like, I flew in a helicopter, as cool, probably one of the coolest jobs. It wasn't always like sunshine and rainbows every single day. It was amazing, but I still had a bad day in it. And I think that's the thing is, if you love it, those bad days are just so small.
So small, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been lovely. And if you would like to be an LPN, like Carly, CDI College has a great program. So you can find out more on cdicollege.ca, and we will talk to you next month. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pick Me Up Podcast Unscripted. Brought to you by CDI College, the training you need for the career you want. Make sure to continue the conversation by following us on our social media pages. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any episodes. And for more information about CDI College, check out our website, cdicollege.ca. Talk to you next time.